Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another exciting episode of All About You. Now, in today's segment, I will be going over one of my Patreon's questions, which was actually very impactful, and I decided it was a perfect topic to discuss today. Coming back from the Atlanta event, I decided, you know what? Instead of all the talk about Shugesh and what you should mainboard, what you should sideboard, what you should be playing in the event, overall, I was like, all right, well, Janemba Mill won the event, and my Patreon Kyotaru asked me, hey, how do you beat Mill? You know, like what's the best way to tackle the matchup, considering that it has been winning anyways, right? So this is for you, and this is for all of you that are still having trouble against that archetype. Now, for one, you want to make sure that your deck has big hitters. Battle cards that will force your opponent to guard 10k or above for each combo. So example, if my opponent is unawakened, as in the Janemba Mill leader, they are a 10k leader, meaning that I want to be putting pressure with battle cards that hit 20k and above, because that forces them to have to guard heavier. Now, the one thing I don't want to do is add combo value to my battle cards. I want to reduce the amount of cards I will be using against them while maximizing the amount of cards they will have to be using against me. So overall, it's just card advantage. I want to make sure that I'm dwindling their hand size as far as I can and as low as I can overall. So with that being said, you want to make sure that you run battle cards in your deck that can put adequate amounts of pressure, because that's very important in order to conquer the matchup. As we all know, all Mill has to do is sit back and play defense while just swinging out with their leaders and playing little battle cards that really don't cost much energy to keep milling you out. And they can try to relieve pressure off themselves by getting rid of some of your threats on board for free of charge, including their leader. They could just use their leader to attack you and bam, mill cards off your deck while still getting rid of threats that are going to keep coming back at them. So you, as a competitor, want to make sure that you keep that under control and that you're hitting hard. Now, the reason why I said earlier in my previous videos, you should not be going so hard against Shugesh-based decks is because most players in the format understand that there's going to be a lot of hate. So you don't have to play hate yourself. It's all about using your mind and being ahead or 2 or 3 steps ahead of your opponents. So if you know people are going to sideboard or mainboard heavy against Shugesh-based decks, you don't have to do that yourself. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Play whatever you want to play. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you can beat the decks that are winning. And Janemba Mill has been winning. So another thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have some kind of finisher in your deck. Now, having a finisher isn't always very important, but in this format, it's a way to give yourself a chance to win. Because unfortunately, Janemba Mill is very powerful and very defensive. And a lot of people, when I see them build their decks, they only have cards that they put maybe some pressure, but then they don't have any finisher. They don't have anything that says, hey, if I get this on the board, you got to deal with this huge threat. And the decks that do have that are like Baby. Baby has that in their deck because they can go up to the big 6-drop 8, which says I'm a 30k triple strike and I have an amazing effect that you have to try to deal with. Other decks, the new Goku's Lineage package, you can go into Height of Mastery with the 3-drop, which is very, very important because that's another win con. It says, hey, Mill, I'm going to tap all your energy out and I'm going to be going in hard. So I'm going to force that Dimension Magic or that Xenos button out of your hand. But the great thing is that using Broly's effect, you can restand a yellow energy and set up for a battering play and get your opponent in a situation where they won't be able to deal with you. But guess what? Xenos button is a good way to deal with cards like that. So you just want to be careful. You don't want to run into a wall. Now, another thing is that you have time. As long as you're not drawing a ridiculous amount of cards, just make sure that you're just swinging out, getting value, but try not to draw so much. Unfortunately, decks like Shenron, they're pretty weak matchups against the Mill. deck, because overall, you're using your Dragon Balls to filter through, so you have so much filtering, and if you're not being proactive in terms of putting pressure on your opponent, you're not doing it right. So that's one thing you want to be careful with. You want to make sure that you are very proactive in your matchup so that you can deal with that deck. Now, you need to make sure that every time you draw a card, it's impactful. So for example, if I have a battle card like my baby, going again with the 6-drop, his ability allows me to draw cards and reduce the power of my opponent's battle cards by 20k. Every time he attacks, you draw a card. Now, what's great about that battle card is that I'm constantly putting in immense pressure every time I do draw a card. So every time I'm going through my deck, I'm putting pressure on my opponent. A lot of people tend to draw cards outside of putting pressure on their opponent, which leads their opponent to be able to capitalize on their extra draw. If you're going through your deck fast and you're not doing anything to your opponent and putting them in a bad game state, you're actually helping your opponent win. They're milling you out and you're drawing, which means that your deck is getting thinner and thinner, meaning that you will eventually lose. And you want to give yourself as many turns as possible to close out the game. You don't want to rush for game. You want to put your opponent in a bad spot eventually, periodically through the game. But in order to do that, you need a deck left. You need some cards left in deck in order to do so. So you want to be careful with overextending on your deck. You can overextend on some of your plays as long as you're not putting yourself in a weird spot where your opponent can capitalize and just game you, because Janemba Mill can also beat you. It's not only that they can win with Mill. A lot of people forget that if they waste too many resources, the Mill player might say, you know what? Let me go for game now. You wasted so many cards. I'm gonna now put you, I'm about to push your shit in, essentially. You know, so you wanna be careful with that. Now, ultimately, you need a game plan. You need to make sure that you know your deck's ins and outs so that you can safely get to that point where you can put your opponent at that disadvantage. Now, this is going to be a short video. Again, thank you, Kiritaru, for sharing your question. I feel like this was very important for the public. And like I said, for all you Patreons, make sure that you ask me questions so I can share it on here. You guys, thank you all for being a part of this channel. As always, this will be all about you.